Welcome everybody to the public session of the NHS Improvement Board meeting. We have apologies from Pat Carter, and we are expecting Darcy. Has just sent us a note saying he's currently with a patient, and for obvious reasons there's no better place for him to be than with a patient. Second choice would be around this table, of course, but everybody else is here. Are there any declarations of interest that we need to report?
No, I think I've lodged with you a further directorship, Jessica, that I've passed on to you a little while ago. It's not relevant to this.
Secondly, just to note we are in PERDA, so we have to recognise that the PERDA rules apply to the extent that we have been advised. Minutes of our meeting on the 30th of March. They're fair record?
Yes.
Yes.
Good, thank you. And matters arising and the action log, either in hand or completed. Ruth, do you want to say anything about the...
Yes, Sarah is going on.
I am, the 9th
of June.
Okay.
Straight after
Excellent.
the election, absolutely.
Excellent.
Off to Boston to see how it's going.
And I've
Good.
spoken to the gentleman at least once and been in email correspondence several times.
Good. Okay, so that's the minutes and matters arising. Jim?
Yeah, I'm not going to run through the standard report. It's all right today. I think since we last met, we've had two really terrible incidents, and I just wanted to, pay tribute to the NHS in the way that it responded. I think the cyber thing was incredible and unprecedented, and people massively pulled together and managed huge disruption, which will frankly still continue for some months. But I think we should record our thanks to them. Something that was often massively oversimplified in the way that it was portrayed. Hospitals are incredible webs of complex networks with kit that's linked across the world, etc. So, thanks for that. And then again this week's events in Manchester, absolutely dreadful events, and the service responded phenomenally well. I saw the Central Manchester leadership yesterday, and Mr. David Dalton this morning as well, and I think just very humbling with the way the NHS and emergency services responded generally. I think sadly this is a feature of life now, and I think colleagues will have a conversation next week about how we help the NHS get into a rhythm of testing itself for things that we would never have imagined before, to just make sure that we're on our toes. But if there was ever any doubt, I think recent events have proven that the NHS, when things are pressured and required, systems kick in, people kick in, and behave in a phenomenal way. We should be very proud of them, and they deserve our thanks.
I think we reinforce that as all of us as individuals and things. And I think I'd go further as well, Jim, and say the public response to the support the NHS gave, and that sort of outpouring of providing food and support and everything from the whole Manchester community and the other emergency services was tremendous. And Caroline, you were mentioning the Today programme this morning, and the nurse who talked about it.
There was a wonderful interview in the Today programme this morning with a nurse who just talked about the experience and the planning. She was the first question she was asked was, well, what was it like? And with the expectation, I think, that she'd talk about the injuries and the crisis, instead of which she said, actually it was very calm. We'd rehearsed this, we all knew what we had to do, we were all in our positions. When the people came in, the system started, and then she talked about how moving it was to be dealing with people, and how this was the NHS at its best. It was a really good interview, just absolutely from the front line.
Ruth, can you make sure we connect?
Absolutely, I'll make contact. And I guess it wasn't just the clinicians that stepped into action, it was a whole range of professionals, whether admin, system supporters, everybody stepped up, and it makes you very proud to be part of the NHS when you see such a response that is so professional, so coordinated. Very proud.
Okay. Jim, other matters in your...
I think, other than that, Ed, we'll continue to be out and about. There's been a lot of work since the last month on ED, reflections, learning from the winter, making sure plans are in place for the coming winter, and performance operationally has picked up a bit, which it would do it this year, but an awful lot of actions going on in place there. Huge effort across the sector to end the year well financially, and colleagues across the country go through the audit process now. As was reported earlier on this week, really significant effort and progress in the last quarter, and a lot of planning and preparation now to make sure that people don't lose time in terms of delivering this year. And I've had the opportunity in recent weeks to get out and about a bit more as well. I was in Sandwell in West Birmingham on Tuesday for their annual leadership event, and again, really fantastic to see organisations really embracing improvement, leadership, QI techniques, etc. And everywhere we go, I think everyone would agree with this. Everywhere you go, you'll see pockets at least of excellence and real energy. So, and I think finally we're in that phase where we're just really trying to make sure this year is as successful as it can humanly be. So, learning from last year and building on that.
Any questions of Jim in the public session of the board meeting stage? Adam, welcome.
Thank you.
Joint working with CQC, which is a subject dear to my heart, and one that Peter Wyman and I are keen to see progressing. So
this paper is presented for information, and it's just really an update in terms of progress against the work that the board will be familiar with, working on the well-led framework. In summary, the bringing together of the historic monitor view of leadership and the CQC view to blend it into one framework, particularly reflecting the new learning and evidence coming from the leadership and improvement framework, but also the commitment that is outlined in that document, and as part, as you said, Ed, of something you and Peter are passionate about, more integrated working between the regulatory bodies. So the paper sets out where we've got to, sets out a summary of what the new framework looks like, and talks about the now diverging roles of each organisation. So fundamentally, the CQC will be using the framework as their assessment tool, and they will be seeking on a regular basis to assess organisations as we're familiar with around what a well-led organisation and a service looks like. And in terms of NHS improvement, it's far more a developmental role, working with providers for them to improve their leadership by offering resources and support. The details are set out there. The consultation has taken place. A large part of it was a joint consultation. There are elements that, due to legal requirements, each individual organisation did, and the results of those will be published after PERDA. And at that point, then, based on that consultation and the responses, we will then take the necessary action. And at the final point I would just draw out is some of the informal work that's been done through various networks, whether it's chief executives, trust secretaries, and other groups, has been a really positive reflection back on the joint working between CQC and NHS improvement on this. So I think it's been well received as a genuine indication of our rhetoric of better working together. And that's all I would draw out.
Good. Jim, do you want to add anything?
No, I think Adam was
Kathy, do you want to?
No, just to support Adam in terms of, I think that we've been part of a steering group looking at this, and I do think that the work between the organisations has been really good. I think in the papers here, it obviously starts to set out the operational implementation, and I think for the CQC it'll be interesting to see how it goes in terms of it's reasonably resource intensive, and therefore I think that's something I'm sure they'll want to reflect on as they go along, and also the suggestions about when comprehensive inspections and won't be done. I think all of that will emerge through the actual practice, if you like, but overall it was a really good working arrangement between the parties, actually.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think we should emphasise how well it's been conducted across both bodies. So I think it's a real exemplar, I think, for joint work, hopefully we'll build on that in the future. And I think Adam and I met the other day and talked about the need for this providers to get involved in as much peer review and as possible in all this process. So very much led and run by the sector with our support rather than kind of outsourced to a different place. So and there's a big appetite for that. We just need to try and develop it in an appropriate way.
Sigurd,
Oh, it's just a question really on point 15, the second trunk point, which refers to a concern to make sure that there are no problems arising from, and there's a reference to conflicts of interest. Could you just enlarge a little bit on what that's all about?
I think as Jim said, a real intention going forward that peer review will form part of what we do. The CQC already use special advisors and probably using the same kind of individuals, current experienced chief executives, chairs, finance, medical directors, etc., etc. And if those individuals are working on both inspection and development, we just need to make sure that that they're not going in expecting a trust that they've worked on the development plan for, but similarly, because of the interconnectedness of the NHS, and increasingly so, that if you are a trust, you're not going and doing a peer review necessarily of your neighbour, but you're going to somewhere where there's no other potential conflicts that would arise. So it's just managing the architecture to make sure that doesn't happen.
Good. So I think we're encouraged. Karen.
Can I just make one point? So first of all, I think it's brilliant to see us working with CQC and establishing one set of criteria for everyone, and exactly the sort of way the system, we're all trying to make the system work together. So that's real forward leadership. In point 7, there's the talk about externally facilitated developmental reviews of leadership and governance, and obviously FTs are required to do that anyway every 3 years, so that's not a change. But I wonder whether your heart starts sinking a little bit at the prospect of more external consultants and lots of work going outside. And I wonder whether there's any way that we can encourage reviews from teams where we've got trusts which are well led and well governed, go in and help us to sort of, in that sense, get peer engagement with more troubled trusts where there's a problem, rather than always going to a McKinsey or someone to do it for us.
So I think the external piece is very much kind of could be read as independent, so not necessarily external in the way that we'll often talk about it in terms of consultancy. I think as the point around the peer review is that we are very keen to have exactly that experienced organisations, well-led organisations that are doing it will provide some real insight. But then there's a bit about the mechanics that needs to make sure the reviews happen. So we're looking at that, and post-consultation and sharing some of that information, some of the thinking that's going on will be published and tested more widely.
So I would like personally for us all, if you're in an outstanding or a good trust, part of that is you've got a commitment. You do 3, 4, whatever it is, organisations a year. And I think encourage that. It's a two-way thing. When you do these things, you bring as much away from it as you leave there. And I think it'll be hard to get that off the ground because everybody's very busy, but we'll make a very strong signal in that direction.
Great. I think that would be a real advance.
The more that we can create an environment of peer regulation in terms of peer review, peer regulation, which then allows the more formal regulation to take assurance from that, I think is a
it'll help change the culture so much if you can spread best practice.
Good. So very encouraged, and I think we look forward to the next stage on that. And then we move to another subject dear to my heart, which is the improvement and the national strategic framework that we've created and published. And again, Adam, you're on.
Yeah, thank you. So again, members of the board will be very familiar due to their contribution to the development of this, which was published in 2016, the end of 2016. This paper just really gives an update in terms of the areas we're working on, particularly as we move into our 17-18 business plan. And I just want to draw your attention to a few things in here. So paragraph 11 talks about one of the key things, which is a real striving to develop the principle of measurement for improvement more. Boards up and down the country, as well as our own, will traditionally look at dashboards full of red and green, and it's very difficult to make informed decisions, and often we'll jump to opinions based on one point in time, or alternatively, a lot of the feedback we get from the service and many of us have experienced is that a lot of time explaining away things that never need to be explained because the system is perfectly in control and we're very reactive. So a real effort to work on there, some really great engagement across the service, a community of practice that we just advertised through the Improvement Hub, had 200 people by the end of the week, all kind of passionate about this, wanting to connect and make a difference. So that's going to be a theme in the service, but also we're very much holding up the lens to say we should not be expecting anybody to do anything we don't do ourselves. So some internal challenges around making sure the way we report our data, the way we use our data in regional interactions is very much underpinned by that approach. We're also taking seriously the behavioural stuff that we highlight in there to create a climate that would allow leaders to flourish. We are partly responsible for creating that climate, and an internal working group has been recently established with representatives from across different directorates to actually really reflect what the pledges we've made as an organisation in terms of the way we interact with the service actually mean, how we will build internal capability up in these areas, and so we can become an exemplar as we look to oversee the service. And the final point in paragraph 15, again, all of the arm's length bodies signed up to the pledges and made a commitment, but in the heat of the everyday, it's often this kind of thing that can slip away. So we're looking to re-energise with ALB boards through the autumn to remind them of the framework, to talk about the differences we can make going into next year, so that it's not just perhaps the echo chamber of people who are very involved in it who support it, but we can embed it more into the everyday. So they would be the key. It's just an update, and we will come back with more updates on the various projects that underpin the high-level framework.
Good, thank you. Questions? Sarah and then Ruth.
Good paper, Adam, thank you. In terms of, you asked for our help in sponsoring the framework across the sector. Just to remind you that I think most of the non-execs go to regional chairs meetings. Certainly I go to 2 or 3 in the Midlands every year. If there is something that can be brought into the agenda for those, the chairs are always interested to hear new things.
Brilliant.
And we normally get 30 or 40 in the Midlands. So.
And we certainly find similarly in the NHS providers chairs events, when this has been and we've presented this, it is warmly received. So, but that would be very helpful. Thank you.
It was just a comment, Adam, that it's great to see some of the talent management stuff that we've been doing now with another cohort of aspiring directors and a new cohort of aspiring deputy directors of nursing, and we're now doing that jointly with NHS England, so that we can tie up this for commissioning and provider directors of nursing. So I think some of that more integrated approach will continue to work along what we've just previously described with the working relationship with CQC. So more to do, but I think it's starting to, a year on, it's starting to really have some benefits.
Kathy.
Yes, so welcome this too. So just a couple of comments really, but also a sort of sense of the challenge we have of sort of changing things a little bit is I was at East London Mental Health Trust the other day, which is an outstanding mental health trust, and some of you will have been, I'm sure. But one of the, apart from the remarkable development and change in their culture and the improvement methodologies and so on, they are absolutely wedded to, from a measurement point of view, the SPC approach or the statistical process control, so that the board is now, if it spots a red or a green, is saying what on earth is that doing here. So I think there's a lot we can do to support this from our, from our own position across the system. But I think we've quite a lot to do really on all of that. And then the other thing is that it seems clear to me that where organisations have become outstanding or have really made a significant improvement, they have mainly got some form of an improvement methodology embedded. Elft happened to use an IHI type approach, but that doesn't seem to me to terribly much matter as long as there is one they can describe, PDSA, whatever it is that is in there. So I think we can really influence this across the system by just supporting that direction of travel, and then they kind of do it themselves. I mean, it's remarkable. You go to these really good places, take you to the front line, the innovation, the change, the enthusiasm is just quite stunning actually. It's very inspiring.
It is, and I mean, everybody knows that this is something that I'm passionate is the right way, the long-term right way to invert where we have got to in many aspects of our health and care system, and it's sort of focus on people. And I have the typical, how are we clear on the purpose of what we're trying to do together? Have we got the processes? But have we got the people dimension of the health service right? And to be honest, I'm not sure that we've paid enough attention to the people component of the health and care system. There are some great exemplars, Jim, and I agree with you. As we go round the country, you see them, whether it's through IHI or through the VMI stuff or whatever. But it's going to become ever more important as we drive forward a reconfigured health and care system, that the people agenda is, quite frankly, as close to the top of the agendas of boards, ALBs and the system. And it hasn't been. And it's a bit, as Adam said, and the paper sort of says it as well. It drops down the agenda because of more urgent, more short-term things. By doing that, you never get to actually the key thing that does prevent you being in short-term operational mode all the time. So I hope we can. I hope we don't have to kick it off too much again. It sounds like it's dipped. We need to get it back. 13 people in a communications group seems a lot. 22 projects seems a lot. I would encourage you, Jim, and hopefully stepping into a focal point on this for a while, and other colleagues around the table, just to remember that people agenda at each and every moment. I know other non-exec colleagues have run organisations and seen organisations, and I hope that I'm not talking in isolation.
No, actually, if I could just pick that up, I was going to say that I highlighted in paragraph 8, and 9, not just the 22 projects, but the 13 priority actions, which are subdivided into multiple projects. And it sort of rather brought to a head my view that one of the problems seems for all of us in running the NHS is we end up with 13 priority actions. It happens across issue after issue, doesn't it? And I would advise you strongly to think about what actually are the 5 things you've really got to do in the first year and make sure they're done, because everything can't be an equal priority.
Right at the top of this agenda, Adam, is the role of leadership. It is absolutely central to this. So I look around the table here, I go to many trusts, and I see leaders who understand the dynamic of creating a climate which oxygenates the workforce. And I see leaders who suffocate the environment. And we have to drive a leadership environment that is one around oxygenating, releasing, creating, harnessing the talent in organisations, and not the reverse. And the enemy of that, quite frankly, is too much process. The enemy of it is micromanagement. And there is a reflex in our system, in the NHS, to micromanagement, which is actually the enemy of the absolute solution to the health care system, which is create the energy in the people. And if you do that, I think you create success. And, I may be barking, but I do believe that. So we accept the report. We do encourage you, I think, to focus on what are the absolutely key priorities.
And I think, just to come back on that part, it's extremely valid, and I think at one level some of those are just people getting on and doing. I think leadership for improvement and measurement for improvement are the 2 things that this year as an organisation we've taken as our priorities. Clearly Leadership Academy and others within these have got other specific actions around talent management, and things like the Virginia Mason programme that are now up and established are one of our actions, but they are now business as usual for us rather than. So I take on board the advice, but try and give some reassurance that these aren't all new things that
You've got your 3 in mind, or 5 in mind anyway. Good.
Thank you. The improvement report and the corporate report are both stars. I should have asked if anybody would like to unstar either of those items. Good, so they're agreed and received. I do, just in passing, and I say it each time, the work of the committees is fundamental to the operation of NHS improvement. And as I read not only the summaries but the detailed minutes, can I thank the chairs and the members of the committees for the work and for the exec team support for those, whether it's provider leadership, audit, nominations, or whatever. It is tremendous to see it. And I presume, Richard, you're all over all of the risks all of the time.
Yes. Yes. And adding to the unconscionable.
Good. Okay. Well, I think that gets us to the stage where we should invite questions from the public. We seem to have Ben. Welcome, Ben. Nice to see you back. Missed a couple of our meetings. Have you got a couple of questions for us?
Yeah, this time last year you published a 12-month set of results for the provider sector, but you haven't this year, which, yeah, why is that?
Yeah. I mean, I remember 12 months ago, to be honest, and I was in receipt of a bit of pressure, even then, not to put out the results at a particular time, because they should be aggregated and audited and things. And you know, we're an organisation which has key obligations to publish data in a routine cycle, which we committed to doing. I agreed, and we agreed as a board, to the voluntary code publication of data with the ONS, and we have been doing that consistently. Indeed, we did it last May, as you said, and we've done it every single quarter since. The difficulty we had, and it's a practical one, because we would ideally love to have published what we think are tremendous results in the circumstances, is that we didn't actually agree a formal date of publication at the time prior to the election being called. And if we had, we would have almost been required to go ahead with the publication of the data. But the date was not set. Because the date was not set, then, and I did check this independently with experts from the Office of National Statistics, we are caught by the PERDA rules. It's a bit of a shame in a way, because as you have this week, and as NHS providers have done this week, you're not covered by the PERDA rules, and you've been able to identify, aggregate, and publish data with your own commentary, which, when I say in large measure, was fair, but we would probably put it a different way in some respects. And we are unable to respond. And I think I'm right in saying, Jim, we would love to respond. We would love to put the story out about the hard, dedicated work of trusts, and we're simply not able to until the 9th of June. And I don't think there's much more I can add on that particular point. I don't know if you want to come back.
And so there's nothing to be added to tremendous results in the circumstances. There's nothing that the board, with its array of information, can do, but can't give us any more detail.
Well, I spoke to HSJ, and I think I was quoted the other day. So we can't quote specific numbers. The numbers you quoted were reasonably accurate, although I think we'll come in when they're actually published slightly better than that.
Careful.
When colleagues are going through the audit process all over the country, but regardless, even with your numbers, it's a remarkable achievement in a final quarter that was incredibly difficult from a volume, a pressure, a demand point of view, etc. So I think we've probably said as much as we can without getting into specific detail of numbers, and as Ed said, we'll publish as soon as physically possible post PERDA, and the facts will be out at that time.
And when they are out, and you will no doubt review them, I'm more than happy to commit either myself or Jim to a more comprehensive conversation with you or colleagues, or with other members of the press community to talk about those results. I just fear that for now we have to, for the next couple of weeks, we have to remain as we are. Slightly disappointed in terms of publication, but very encouraged by the performance of the sector.
Can I ask another question?
Subject to it being broadly on the agenda of the public meeting, yes, of course.
Yes, so in the public paper there's reference to there are the minutes of the Technology Committee, which refer to a paper coming to the private session of this meeting about where accountability lies for the effects of the cyber attack. Is it a correct reading of what's in the public domain, but as such no formal accountability has been decided for where blame lies for what happened?
I'll let Sigurd come in, because Sigurd chairs our Technology Advisory Committee, and Jim. I mean, I want to say two things. One, the actual response to the incident was pretty impressive. I think there's then what are the lessons learned, and we had a Chairs Council yesterday, the chairs of NHS Digital, NHS England, and myself, the department and its technology subcommittee leads and experts, and we have clearly focused on what do we draw from this attack, what were the actual facts as opposed to the reported facts, what do we do about the level of preventative activity that we need in the face of these attacks, and what do we do, and I said this, not to prevent an incident, but when an incident happens again, as it surely will, what is our response and what is our protocol? Many of those were very strong, but some of them I think were less strong than they should have been. Sigurd, I don't know if you want to add anything, and then Jim will come in because Jim was actively involved.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. You're in a sense conflating two separate issues, and maybe that's because the minutes weren't as clear as they should have been. There was a discussion about responsibilities for cybersecurity, and as things stand, that responsibility sits very clearly with the, in this particular case, Will Smart. There was a separate discussion which we will be continuing about more widely and more generally how to provide governance over the whole data and technology agenda across the NHS and to achieve better coordination, particularly at non-executive level, and that's an ongoing discussion, but nothing much to do with last week's cyber attacks.
Yeah, and just briefly, you used the word blame, and I would just strongly state that this isn't about blame. So,
Yeah.
I think the key thing with all these things is very quickly regrouping and reflecting on what happened and work out how things can be improved upon for the next event, which is what everybody's focused on doing. I think it's fair to say that the incident, whilst well managed, pointed some gaps in who does what.
Yeah.
So I think we're just very actively trying to make sure that those gaps aren't there in the future. And it was a very different kind of experience to the normal kind of incident that we're used to dealing with. So there was an awful lot of learning in that process, and that's ongoing. We've had a debrief internally. We've had an engagement with NHS England, NHS Digital in different ways, and that'll continue over the next couple of weeks. So that's really what that was all about. It was, I think, it caught everybody, being such an unusual and such a disruptive event and of such scale. As Ed has already said, I think colleagues across the country worked phenomenally hard and with incredible capability to manage the disruption in the way that they did. And I think finally, if you were just watching this through the newspaper, you'd think it only affected the NHS, which it didn't. And it's easy to forget the NHS is huge. Bart's had a lot of interest. Bart's is the size of a small country, and its technical networks are just incredibly complex. So again, I think there's a danger in oversimplifying these things, but an awful lot to learn from in terms of what we do going forward.
So what are the gaps that you look like?
I'm not going to share those gaps here and now for obvious reasons, but our processes will be amended following. And we're largely without getting into specifics, just about who does what when. So the natural process on you know, major RTA, for example. It's just very clear who does what, and we developed a lot of processes through the Junior Doctors Industrial Action. It was very clear through that process. I think this one being of such a different nature did have some confusion, largely amongst the national bodies, about who did what. So I think in good spirit, colleagues are making sure that that's just entirely clear going forward.
I mean, what I want to see, and I'll be clear on it to this extent, what I want to see is the same level of critical testing in the event of a cyber attack across the national stage as we get with the PRR and other events. And I think until we test a destruction as a practice, a series of scenarios around that, I don't think we will have learnt enough. And I'd rather do it in a test environment than in a real life environment. We did that with the Olympics, we did it with all sorts of other types of things, and I think we need to do that, and it's one of my recommendations to this board and to the Chairs Council that we ensure that's the case, that we get on with that, along with other things.
I think that's right. It just as an example, I saw yesterday a region, so a few STP areas working together, who worked very well together during the process with national body support, but largely the organisations there mucked in together, helped each other out, developed new means of communication using WhatsApp and other forms, and I think it's helped them crystallise. You know, the world's moved a lot in the last couple of years and how we use technology and stuff, so a lot of the processes need amending and reflecting in that regard.
You have to learn what to do, but we also have to learn what not to do. And I think that was another set of things that came out of this. You know, some people did some things which potentially hindered a quicker solution.
Yeah.
But we will, you know, there'll be a full conversation and full dialogue on this at a future meeting, and I think we'll have, we should have a future meeting in public talking about our presence in the event of you know, crisis, and it's not just a cyber crisis; it could be another type of crisis. Is that all right, Ben? Thank you very much for coming. I don't think today you're joined by any other members of the public, so we thank you for your 4 questions. And at this stage, I think we can conclude the public session of the board and reconvene in 2 minutes after a comfort break. Thank you very much.